The next generation of great Catholic podcasting is here. This is what your brain has been waiting for. Topics that come up around the dinner table will be given the truth treatment, all from a Catholic perspective. Sit back, relax, grab your cup of coffee, and enjoy the show.
You've just joined Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin.
Happy Monday morning to all y'all out there. I'm Kevin here along with Matt for Matt and Kevin on Monday morning. And thank you all for being here for our, the people who love us and the people who hate us. We know that there are those people out there who are haters, but if you're listening to this, we appreciate you. Thank you especially to all the people who have recently signed up on Patreon and supported this channel. It means a ton, and it really does help us just simply to create more content. And it helps to pay us for the content that we spend a lot of time on. So thank you very much for that. We really, truly, greatly appreciate you guys. And we will do our best to continue to make new, good Catholic content. Now, Matt and I, we've kind of failed to say this over the last couple of shows. I have failed to say this. We do have to remind everyone, we are not experts. We are not moral theologians. We are not priests. We're just two guys having conversations. And, maybe our opinions are right or wrong. We're just having a chat. Now, some people don't like that. And if you don't like that, then just, very seriously, turn off this episode and go to the one about St. Philomena, which my mom did, which is beautiful. And it's very nice. And there's nothing you can lose from it. So, it's fine. You don't have to listen to the show. I just want to say that to everyone. If it irritates you, then you can skip it. It's really okay. Matt, how are you doing?
Hey, Kev, I'm doing really well. As you were kind of introducing the show there, made me think. I was thinking of St. Philomena when you started for some reason, because I have my calendar here of the feast days, and then you threw her name out there, and I was like, okay, now I got to bring her up. I did not know that she was so suppressed in the new calendar. I looked it up. They just demolished any mention, any reference, like totally threw her out the window. And man, I've had people come up to me and say, not come up to me, but message me and say, wow, I didn't know about this, or I didn't know she was such a powerful intercessor that all the popes. Your mom made a great post. Kind of speaking of your mom, she made a great post on Facebook outlining a lot of the popes' statements or devotions or elevations of her, and how highly they thought of her, and how much they turned to her for so many things. So definitely, I guess, kind of a new devotion to maybe new trad Catholics or whatnot. So certainly something that I have kind of, had to unlearn or relearn as I have, kind of made a little journey here myself. But yeah. So
well, and I think it's interesting that you see some of these saints that have been hijacked, and you see St. Christopher, St. Philomena,
so many.
St. Joseph, St. Francis has turned into a hippie. He's this hippie, liberal, I love everybody good saint. This is what they do because, and I really think, it's an interesting thing that I think that, the devil has a plan for that. Obviously, some of the saints who are maybe the ones we most need in our times, they have been turned, either they've just been done away with, like St. Philomena by the Novus Ordo, or they've been turned into, some, hippie lovey-dovey weirdo, like they've done to St. Francis.
People have no idea some of the things St. Francis of Assisi actually said. That's you want to talk about, he was, because I thought the same thing too. I grew up and they used to bless the pets and bless your pet goldfish, and this is what St. Francis did, is he just walked around and kissed animals like he's Cinderella. Look at his actual works in the books and the articles that he's written. A staunch defender of extra ecclesiam nullo salus, no salvation outside the church, excellent defender of the mass and the one true faith. People would have their heads explode if they would truly find out the theology of St. Francis of Assisi. Kevin, maybe you want to mention real quick, I commented on some of the traditions you guys do out there. You had a video of like a pole dancer, not a pole dance. Sorry, I shouldn't have called it that.
What video did I have,
ribbon dance.
Gee whiz. Ladies and gentlemen, it was not what Matt just said. Okay, I understand where you're coming from though. Yeah, so there is a video, and I posted this on Facebook.
Kevin does crazy things on Sunday morning.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, hey, yeah, don't follow Kevin on Facebook.
Sorry.
So there's these children, Matt, and they're all dressed up very, very traditionally, and they have like these ribbons, and they tie like a braided knot around a pole. So this is where Matt.
Okay.
So I don't think that's what it's called, but it's really cool. It's really a neat tradition, and it's something that we talked about it actually a little bit today. We went to the beer garden. Matt sees me right now. I'm actually still dressed in my lederhosen. So sorry for
Yes.
all of you who don't have video on this podcast. It really is a shame for you. But no, it's a beautiful thing here in Germany. The traditions still exist.
So did you want to start, Kev, our first topic? Did you want to do
I do.
the phenomenon of pop icon, country icon? I don't know what she is anymore. Taylor Swift.
She's
pop.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, and I think it's something that I've talked about recently, and it's been on my mind for a while because my brother came, and I don't pay much attention to American news or anything anymore, to be honest, especially since I'm off Twitter. I don't really see anything. But they mentioned how it's like it is an unusual phenomenon in the U.S. like bizarrely so with what's going on with Taylor Swift. Like she's doing a concert tour for the last couple of years, and it sells out within 2 minutes, and it's 100,000 people in a stadium. It's really pretty nuts. And for me, it made me really wonder, why. And it made me in my mind, I was trying to compare it with what happened with the Beatles, because I think that's the only thing you can really compare it to.
Yes.
In history, really.
Numbers wise, yes.
Yeah, and so that made me think, okay, that being the case, I think it's a really interesting thought experiment to go and consider, okay, why did the Beatles happen, and talk about that, and then to talk about why is Taylor Swift happening, and maybe we can kind of get some idea of what is happening in our culture. I think it's an interesting idea.
I think I'll kind of just summarize here real quick. So at the end of July, so we're a few weeks ago now, Forbes magazine released an article saying that Taylor Swift has matched one of the Beatles' most impressive Billboard records. So her latest album, I guess this is what it's called, Speak Now Taylor version, has conquered the Billboard 200 with the largest debut of the year, but has produced an impressive swath of hits on the top 100. Her latest achievement on the ranking allows her to match one of the most successful bands of all time, the Beatles, in an historic record. So it says here, this week, which was end of July, Taylor Swift had made her mark on the top 100 by claiming 3 spots inside the top 10, which is an uncommon feat. While more and more artists have been able to achieve this in recent years due to changes in the charts and music consumption habits, Swift's accomplishment is particularly remarkable. What sets her apart is that 3 of her top 10 hits come from different albums, a feat that no other woman has achieved before. Last little piece here. According to Billboard, Swift's success is not solely based on her popularity and power, but rather her unique confluence of events that have allowed her to have 3 albums simultaneously popular enough to generate top 10 singles. This remarkable achievement puts her in the same league as only the Beatles, who established this feat around 50 years ago. So I think one of the points to make here with her is because I remember her when she kind of came out, when she kind of, grew in popularity, and she was this singer/songwriter. And I think at that time it was a very popular combination of the guitar, country music, and a young woman who wrote her own music and got recognized for it. And I think what happens is country music here in the US, country music has that Southern appeal to it. People from all across the country, really, countries in the United States, enjoy country music, I have found, but obviously it's huge in the South. It's like the genre, I guess you can say, of America. People think of America, country music is going to come to mind. And she really hit a lot of hearts with that. It was a very country-ish style, but her music has changed over the years, and she's gotten, obviously, the grip of Hollywood around her, and they have just catapulted her into stardom. And I think one of the reasons why I know somebody who's somewhat involved in the music industry is people don't really know that all these big names that you know of don't really make as much money as you would think from just recording their music. A lot of the credit goes to the writers, goes to the producers. The people who actually sing it in front of the microphone, perform it, and the big names that don't make a lot when it comes down to spreading out who gets paid.
Piracy. Go ahead. And piracy.
Yes.
Piracy is a huge, I've heard that too, that these people who record albums, they make very, very little because they can't actually,
music.
It's just stolen. So they even, so much so that they'll even just publish stuff like straight to YouTube, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. Right. So what changes her a little bit is she writes her own stuff. So that's point one in terms of her marketing ability, her own power. Those lyrics are hers. So she doesn't have to pay anybody or share dividends or whatever to pay these people who are literally writing these songs that are getting the top rankings and all that. They're her words. And for the most part, I don't know about now, but she used to really produce her own music. She would play the instruments for it, and that would contribute as well too. So she was kind of like a successful, I don't want to say self-funded, but she did it all herself. And that really, I think, allowed her to catapult into a new category, because all these big stars, you think of the big powerhouse names over the years, and I'm just going to throw out, like Whitney Houston or whatever, Celine Dion. They had a lot of people do, all they've added really was their voice. They didn't write, they didn't produce, they didn't play instruments, they just sang. She was a bit different, and it is a bit different. And the Beatles, I don't know, I believe the Beatles with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, they wrote their own works, and they might have played for a bit. So I think that definitely has something to say. But the point that you made is the Beatles were certainly a cultural mark, right? The British invasion kind of in the 60s, when the demographic, or when the cultural shift in America really started to kind of shape. Big change, right? And the Beatles lyrics, I think, kind of paved to that. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on this? Taylor Swift marking a new era of maybe a cultural shift, or
yeah,
what do you think?
I mean, I thought about this quite a bit the last few days when we thought about talking about this, and I don't really have an answer. I mean, but the Beatles, I think, is really interesting, because obviously they came into power, or whatever you want to call it, in the mid 60s, and that was, as you say, that was during this great upheaval of society. And I think you could see, it's kind of like, look what happened in the church. Obviously, you had the church kind of overthrown, not completely, of course, but in general, overthrown in the 1960s at the Vatican II, usurped. And that was in the 1960s. And you had all these other things. You had the sexual revolution, you had Vietnam, you had drugs and love and peace and all these different things. And I think that you obviously, that didn't come out of nowhere. So these things were growing. So you look at the 1950s, and you had Elvis Presley, you had Buddy Holly, you had these other groups that were getting really big. I mean, Elvis was obviously huge, but there was still not quite this. It was almost a controlled thing, like the Elvis Presley love, or even if you want to call it worship, whatever you want to call it, was kind of more held under control. And I actually think that's totally connected with the church. I really think that all of these things happened at once, and you can't tell me that's an accident. I mean, JFK was assassinated, Vietnam began, the Vatican II was in session. The secret of Fatima in 1960 was not released. These things were life shaking moments. And you talk to someone who was around back in 1960, that was a big deal that they didn't release the secret. I wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
I would look really good
yes.
for an age if that was me. But no, if you other people who were there, they've mentioned, I've talked to somebody, I forget who it was, it may have been Father Benedict, and it was a big deal. Like now it's so long ago, it's kind of like, oh yeah, the third secret wasn't released. But at the time, people were hey, it's 1960, and Our Lady said, they were waiting for it, and then it didn't happen, and people were like, hey, what's going on? And then they call the council, and it's like, okay, what, and I think music was very much connected with that. And I think you had, it was connected with the revolution and the drugs and all these different things, and it brought this idea of, almost, this false freedom, that hey, let's go crazy. And you saw it when you look at the crowds of the Beatles, and the crazy women who are actually losing their minds. You can see the videos, losing their minds, like the control that people had basically for Elvis. I'm not saying all the time, but better. It was, the Beatles came and they lost their minds.
You know what John Lennon said? We're bigger than God.
Yeah.
Right. Remember that? And he said, we are the new God, or we are Christ, or what have you. And I think, and I can't remember who I'm inclined to say maybe Padre Pio, but this would be a total guess, so don't hold me to this, but I believe it was him or somebody similar at the time who said that all of these, cultural phenomenons or whatnot are an attempt of the Antichrist to get man's mind off of God. Right. And these people, you brought up a point that I wanted to mention with the Beatles, and then with Taylor Swift or whatever other artists, is these people go nuts, absolutely bonkers over, really, if you really boil it down to its root, just another human being, no different than you or I, who just so happen to catapult to stardom. They've made it consumption, anything else but God. Right. And Satan is subtle. I'm not saying listening to music is bad, but I'm saying that he is subtle, and he'll put a shiny apple in front of you, right? He's not going to look evil and dark with horns. He's going to distract you from God. And people, people look for purpose. They look for reason. They look for, an ends to the means in their life. They look for happiness, and they find it in all these things that are not God, and they find it in music. How many people have said, I'm just again, Taylor Swift, and she saved me, or I was in my darkest period and I turned to Taylor Swift and she helped me. I do think there's something to say about good music or good art or what have you, lifting you up and giving you good spirits and contributing to maybe helping you overcome a situation in your life. But at what cost, or how big are these people? Are we so distracted? Are we so engrossed in their life? I mean, there are people who they consume this 24/7, all pop culture, right? And it's got to be a tool of Satan. How what else can it be other than to distract us, than to pull us away from what we probably should be doing? And we find out that people who are so engrossed in all of these things certainly don't have time to pray the rosary, certainly don't have time to read or to study their religion. Big distraction, Kev. And you can't help but notice that again, that third secret was not released. Like you said, that was a huge point for people at the time. A lot of faithful Catholics were waiting for that. Fatima was known. The Sisters of Fatima were known, and there was a devotion to it. And so people were on edge, eagerly waiting. What is this third secret coming to the church? That never came out. And instead we had nothing but really talk about Satan being unleashed from hell. Like it crashed in the 60s. And it makes me think, if we try to connect, well, what happened with the Beatles and this sexual revolution and all in the 60s to today. There was a sermon, I believe it might have been from Father Desposito or Bishop Sanborn, one of them, but they kind of talked about how the church and the world will really reach a bottom. It will really reach like an utmost end before a renewal of some kind. And you wonder if God has just had enough of all of this idol. Is it idol worship? I mean, I think in a lot of ways it could be. Doesn't necessarily have to be doesn't have to be Pachamama, right? We could worship other things as well. I think we're being led there. And I can only think that I do believe that the Beatles did have some demonic, some occult practice. There are stories, who knows what to believe and what not to believe, but there are stories that say the Beatles sold their souls to the devil for fame, that they made a pact with the devil. That could have been it. There is a video, I've seen it out there. John Lennon is reading a letter handed to him that says, "We have received news from a Ouija board that's saying that you will be assassinated, X, Y, and Z." And it came to be. You can put it up on YouTube. It comes up. Type in John Lennon Ouija board. Yoko Ono is sitting there with him, and they look at this. So I don't know. I definitely think that there's some sort of a cult. I don't think people get this big or this famous without supernatural help. I think it's a very strange thing.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you, and I think that's, yeah, I
the king of the world. Yeah,
you got to be careful with saying, is she, because I think if you just say, oh, she's just satanic, and I don't know, I don't know her, I don't know. I think her music, I looked through a bit of it, and it's, from what I saw, it's hear me out. Don't panic when I say this. It's relatively innocent, relatively. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it is. I mean, I would certainly not listen to it. I would not want my kids to listen to it. First of all, she blasphemes. She uses God's name in vain. She has a song where she dresses up like the devil, and I think even dances in hell or something. I mean, there's a lot of things about her that I mean, and she sings about angsty teenage breakups and stuff. It's just not stuff. I mean, it's just not stuff we should listen to. I mean, let's just be super honest here. It's just not. And if anyone does, I'm not condemning you. Again, I'm not a priest, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, my opinion is it's pretty clearly not stuff that we should listen to. Definitely not stuff our kids should listen to. But I'm not saying that she's possessed or from hell or anything like that. But I think it is, as you said. So for something to get this big, you have to wonder. You have to, and like with the Beatles, it was all this connection of things coming at once. And I think now, when you're in these times, it's harder to see. I'm sure back to the 1960s, people were like, okay, this is pretty crazy, but it obviously felt different because it was their lives
in the moment.
And I think in our moment, if you really think about it, look, 50 years from now, people are going to look back on Jorge Bergoglio and say, what on earth? Maybe it's 100 years from now. I hope. I mean, obviously this is what I'm hoping, but I think so. And they're going to look back on the transgender stuff, and they're going to look back on I don't know, Disney and all what the world became, and they're going to say, that was the craziest time ever. It was absolutely insane. I mean, and the devil was really out. And I think that's something that we talk about almost every show, that I think the devil is, I don't think he's even hiding anymore. But I mean, my question about Taylor Swift, and what I really wonder is, her message, like the Beatles, I don't know what their message was. I think that more of like their music was more of the revolution. I mean, like actually like the rock and roll, like, hey, these guys are striking a chord in a harder way, almost literally. Like it was just a different form of music in a lot of ways. But Taylor Swift's not. So her style is very blasé. I mean, there is nothing.
I agree.
There is just. I'm not
agree.
saying it's bad, but there's nothing new about it. There's nothing unique. It's just not. I mean, you can like it. That's fine. But there's nothing unique about it. It's not like the Beatles. So I think it must be something in what she writes. And so maybe that's the case. And what I've seen in her music is that it's extremely angsty and it's extremely emotional. Everything it's just based on emotion. And I wonder, I really wonder if that, you see the world right now and you see all of the mess and so much of modernism and error
and feminism.
Well, don't get me started on why this is all happening.
They're in there in her
part of this is happening. Part of this is happening because women are running the world right now, or feminism, maybe not even just women, but women and feminized men are running the world. I think that's absolutely the case. That's a big problem with our world right now. We don't have actual manliness. And I think that from that, I think you see again that these all of it's coming together. So you kind of get rid of objective truth and you get rid of logic and thinking and all these different things, and it turns into just how do I feel? And that is the world we live in.
If you look at her lyrics and you look at her music and you combine both, right? They're very relatable to a lot of people, especially a lot of young women. And I think that is, if I were to just somehow get into music writing, which I'm not, I think that's how you appeal to people. Because if I just wrote some random song, right, why would you have any inclination to want to listen to it? But if I can write emotionally as if I am you going through something terrible that I want to express myself in, then I connect with you. And I think that is big for a lot of her lyrics and a lot of the lyrics of a lot of other famous artists is they make it relatable so the person who's listening could sing it out. That's why everybody knows her songs, or you go to her shows, everybody's singing along. Why? Partially because it's relatable to them. They can relate to the experience that she's singing about and go with it. There was a song recently that came out about, they're all songs about breakups and heartache and sadness. Right. So people, you hear these lyrics, it allows you to connect it with your own personal experience, and you create this scenario combining her lyrics with your own in your head, and then you're able to sing it as if I'm the one singing this song. This is coming from my heart, from my soul, from what I went through, and it's me. And I think that is what has touched everybody, is because it's so relatable to them that they get obsessed with it.
Well, and I think you're totally right. And I think this is exactly why it's really, maybe it is from the devil. Because if you think about it, and it actually strikes me, there was a song actually from Kelly Clarkson, but similar genre, similar style. And it's called Breakaway, I think.
No, of course, yes.
Or maybe it's a different song. I don't know. There was a Kelly Clarkson song. Anyway, I broke up with a girl about 15 years ago now. And this song was out and it was big. And I think it was Breakaway. I don't know. Anyway. And I remember I even felt connection with the song. I really remember that. I remember listening to it. I was like, wow, I'm feeling all these things and that's how I feel.
That's it.
Right. This is, I'm so unfairly treated. And really think about it this way. That is how the world is telling us we should handle things. Think about that. I mean,
correct.
I am going through something. So tell me what I want to hear. And I'm miserable. So yeah, good for me. What does the church tell us? You go through a hard time, you pray, you sacrifice, you say, God have mercy on me. You don't say,
pick up your glass of water.
Thanks, Matt. I'm sorry. Thanks, Francis. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, if you're depressed,
I know you were on a good point there.
No, that's a good point. Thank you, Bergoglio, for your wisdom.
You feel better now?
But yeah, exactly. Where's my water? No, but it's such a bizarre thing that I think we don't think about enough, about how the world, especially media pushes emotions down our throat on a minute basis. I mean, all the time. They're trying to tug at our strings. And I understand a lot of that's just to make money. As you say, it's because people like that. But there is a deeper thing too. It is really trying to get us to, as you say, especially to forget when we're having a hard time, when we're in a breakup, whatever it is, our minds don't go to God. Our minds say, hey, I want to play this song that makes me feel the way I want to feel.
Correct. There's this very popular song. It was played all the time. Olivia Rodrigo. I think that's how you would say it. She's young, 17, 16, 18, somewhere around there. She wrote a song and it's called, I pulled this up earlier, Driver's License. And what it is, it's about her. So it's her own experience is, so there's a line in it. And she says, I'm going to get this wrong. I just looked it up and now you said forever. And now I drive alone past your street. So she's talking about obviously her, this guy, whoever she was with, told her we'll be together forever. They broke up, and now she has this, all these feels, all these emotions when she drives past his house as if he's a stranger. Do you know the young women that can relate to? And as you just said, is what I commented earlier, is I can sing that song as if it's me. And so now when people hear it, it's like, wow, I can relate to this. And you're right, it's teaching them to handle and to process their crosses is what they really are. Their crosses in an emotional, psychological way that are totally removed from virtue, from the sacraments, from prayer, from turning to the church. Can you do both? Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with hearing a song and saying, "Oh, this resonates with me." I don't think there's harm in that.
Right.
But to what level or to what condition are you allowing it to shape you? You hear a song that touches you and it means something to you and you can relate, fine, that's good. But you should obviously use the church's means to heal and to grow and to develop, not what Taylor Swift has to teach you.
Let's be honest, because I know people are gonna blast me for this, but there is a definite argument that says that any music that tugs at your emotions, any music that tugs at your emotions is bad. It's because music, if you look at it at its purest point, it should bring our minds to God, right? And or at least to right. Peace, to a peace of soul. If you think of Gregorian chant, obviously I'd say it does both. Palestrina does both. Mozart, I think, typically can do both. Now, if you look at, say, Claude Debussy, what's that song? The Moonlight Sonata or something. So I think it's something a very sad piano song or something. I think there is an argument that says that you shouldn't listen to that either. Now, I'm not the judge of that, but I think that's something worth considering, because I think we need to consider, why do we listen to music? Why do we watch movies? Why do we do anything that we do? And if we're not asking that question, then we're not doing our job, because our job is to go to heaven. And if listening to Taylor Swift isn't helping us get to heaven, we at least have to consider that we shouldn't do it. And I think I know that's oversimplifying it, but we have to consider things that way, or we're not taking ourselves seriously.
I think, now I know nothing about this, so there's nothing I can really say, but I think, again, I don't know if maybe Bishop Sandberg, but I can't remember, but someone gave a Catholic perspective on music, and we really don't think about how music is actually, there's like a perfection to it. And now I have nothing more to say than that. I can't remember what I read or how it relates, but there's something to say about the perfection, the beauty of music that goes far beyond what you just casually listen to or play. There's an element about it that really is of God and has a beautiful symmetry and parallelism and just everything about it is really of the divine. And people have studied it, and it makes you think back to the greatest. Think about it. Some of the greatest performers and songwriters and musicians and composers of all time. They wrote music for the church. We mentioned Mozart, right? Mozart wrote Mass in C minor, which is one of the most haunting, beautiful orchestra pieces that I've ever heard. You can hear the grand Kyrie eleison in the beginning. It's like it was their same with art, sculpting, painting. It was a joy to work for the church. It was a great pleasure. It was a great honor to apply these things to the mystical body of Christ, and they're related. And I think we need to keep them related.
No, absolutely. And I'll be really curious to see. 50 years from now with Taylor Swift, where are we going? Now, I know, Matt, we wanted to talk about going from Taylor Swift.
The other Taylor.
Another Taylor. Not the one who made my nice vest here, but
So here's a quick point that I wanted to touch on too. Let me find this one here. So Michael Lofton, who is I'm in the wrong chat here, who is a prominent Catholic Answers, EWTN, Novus Ordo conservative apologist, had something to say about a little conversation on Twitter. So Taylor Marshall himself tweeted, "How do you convince non-Catholics about the truth of Catholicism. Join Dr. Taylor Marshall for a free online class. That was his tweet. Michael Lofton at Reason and Theology retweeted it and said, here's how. So he's talking about here's how to convince non-Catholics about the truth of Catholicism. He said, here's how. Urge them not to watch Taylor Marshall. And then the tweet that I wanted to kind of comment on really quickly was somebody quote tweeted that and said, Dr. Marshall brought me to the brink of despair, and I know souls who have left the church because of him. Protecting potential converts from his influence is a moral imperative. Now, really quick, I went down the Taylor Marshall pipeline years ago at this point, and I totally get it. I bought his book, Infiltration, and read it. And yeah, there is an element to it that is everything is just bad. Everything is doom and gloom. And you've kind of touched on this recently with Twitter, right? This was kind of a topic that we touched on. And I think the end result of conservative Novus Ordo or semi-traditionalism is a lot of despair, because for us as Sedevacantists, we believe in the creed. We believe in the act of faith, that the church cannot err when she teaches. We make this act of faith. We believe that the bride of Christ is spotless and always was spotless, that she is a perfect society, as Pius IX taught, or Pius XI taught, that she is, as St. Augustine said, Christ's very body. We don't have to discard or discredit these teachings or try to make anything fit to make it work. And I do think that there is an element, as I kind of moved away from it, of despair, because I remember thinking, people in that movement, and I was one of them, it was never conversation about anything beautiful or good or true about our faith. It was always, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Did you catch this? Did you catch that? We're here, we're there. What are we going to do? There's always, what are we going to do? Right? Especially with the threats of, is the Fraternity of St. Peter, are they going to close? Can Francis shut down the Institute of Christ the King? Can we lose our diocesan Latin Mass? Is the SSPX, can they be touched by anything here? There was a lot of worry. And there is a despair element to that. And I know people they do try to want to live a good, holy Catholic life and raise their families in it. I get that. But I do agree actually with that point. I didn't at the time, but I do agree now that there is a lot of despair, I think, in it, because you do have to somehow reconcile the church with what is going on and call that simultaneously the true body of Christ. And I don't know, I think you might have a different kind of view of Taylor Marshall than I do, but anything you want to add?
No,
I think there's a despair, or
yeah, I think
that movement.
I generally agree, because I think it has to be. I mean, honestly, if you are in the Novus Ordo and you're not full blown Novus Ordo, it must be a miserable existence. It has to be. I mean, as you said, I mean, you can't be any other way. If you want tradition, if you want the Catholic Church, which I'm sure most of these people do, of course, it can't be good. You can't be. I mean, look what's happened. Look what happened at the World Youth Day, which we're going to do a show with Louis Verrecchio this week. That's going to go do a deep dive into what happened at World Youth Day. And I'm telling you, it's going to be shocking. I guarantee you everyone's going to be shocked, because some of the stuff is absolutely bonkers. I really, really insane. And I mean, if you imagine, like for us, we're sitting on the outside saying, yeah, this is crazy. Leave this and come to the true church. They're in it, Matt. That is their church. There's a story of these young kids at the World Youth Day. I'm going to tell it real quickly. There's a picture, and there's these, I think, 3 or 4 kids or teenagers kneeling in front of what do you call it? I suppose it's supposed to be Tupperware. Yeah, Tupperware. I think a plant on top, right? Like a green plant on top of like these 3 or 4 Tupperware containers.
Beautiful.
That were supposedly containing the Blessed Sacrament, the Holy Eucharist. And obviously, we see that picture and we say that is obviously, first of all, it's not the Holy Eucharist, thank goodness, but that's a blasphemy. That is sacrilegious. That is an absolutely mind-blowing, horrific thing to do. But these kids, I saw an interview with one of these girls, and she said, okay, she walked into this tent because there was a sign that said, "Here's the Blessed Eucharist." So she walked in, and she said, "This is horrible. They are abusing and mistreating the Holy Eucharist." So she went and got her friends, and her friends came, and they knelt down in front of what they think to be Christ in the Blessed Sacrament that is being abused by these horrible, horrible people of the Novus Ordo. How can you imagine being one of these people, one of these teenagers who's trying to make reparation during the World Youth Day run by the Pope? Matt, I mean, of course it's depressing. The entire thing's depressing. Their religion is depressing. It is based on nothing Catholic. And I mean, it's terrible. And Taylor Marshall knows all this stuff. He says all of this stuff, and then he doesn't do anything. So yeah, I think he is to blame for lots of
Well, he brings light to a lot of problems. You know, he certainly has a wealth of knowledge. I feel like he has a very broad audience, a lot of listeners, and he brings things out there that, remember the whole Pachamama thing was he really brought that to light. I feel like he had a big influence as to what was actually going on. But yes, the end here is where we fall, is that you tell people that all this stuff is going on, and that at the same time it is the vicar of Christ on earth, the sovereign pontiff, the full weight of the magisterium here is being exercised. And that's where people, like, you know, they say, oh, you're jumping ship, or you're not standing firm when the church is going through her persecutions and all of those things. There have been the church has been persecuted from when Christ was on earth. There's always persecutions, right? But the distinction that has to be made is that the persecutions now, unlike then, now are coming from the authorities, the hierarchy of the church, which completely contradicts everything that the church has always taught about her own nature, right? She is the defender of orthodoxy. She is the gatekeeper of tradition. One of the saints, he said, the powers of the papacy and the Pope himself is what keeps the Antichrist at bay. All of the evil in the world is kept kind of held back by the powers of the Pope. So this you're jumping ship during persecution. Who is persecuting you? And that's the question that has to be asked, because you have to get them to realize, I'm not being persecuted by any outside force or any religion who's coming in on me. My hierarchy, which is infallible collectively, is persecuting my own religion. It doesn't work.
They persecute your own religion and say all the other religions are fine too. I mean, what's the point? If I'm these teenagers and I'm walking in there and seeing that my supposed priests and my supposed bishops and my supposed pope are committing sacrileges against God, I mean, what am I going to think? I mean, what's my thought? This is my church. This is my faith. I mean, I mean, what do they actually think? And as you say, I think they do. Maybe they do think, okay, we have to save this from within. It is an impossibility. It can't. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, because, you know, who's going to save it from within? The church practically condemns revolutions of any kind, political revolutions. Not necessarily condemn. I mean, that's too strong. But they are strongly against revolutions, and it's because the revolutionaries, when they overthrow, even if it's a really bad government, what do they become? They usually become despots. You know, I mean, and just imagine that in the Catholic Church, who's going to overthrow Francis? Who? And then if they overthrow him, what's going to happen? Are they going to put Taylor Marshall on the papal throne? I mean, seriously, what are they going to do? You can't have this. I mean, you can't do it yourself. Church, this is exactly why the church has to be infallible, Matt. It has to be. It is from Christ. You can't start saying that it is a ship that is sinking, and we have to save it. We who? You and me as lay people? No.
Which you'd have to say, Paul VI, if he were a true pope, was totally right when he said there's this movement, this traditional movement, who does not want to follow the council or follow the reforms of the liturgy that we are implementing. I'm paraphrasing, these are basically his words. They are rejecting what we are giving them in the name of tradition. And he said to them, his next line was, who is the judge of tradition? Is it not for this holy see and for our magisterium to judge it? Who are you? Right. So there's something to say with that, because if you want to be a traditional Catholic, to listen to Paul VI say these things and then to disobey him in the name of tradition would be schismatic. It's a serious sin. And that's the traditional Catholic teaching here. You can't win this way. And I think, really all this Pachamama stuff and all that, it's a fruition, really. It's just a manifestation of Vatican II, because if all religions are a means of salvation, right, then there's nothing wrong anymore with what praying with them. And you find common ground, right? Well, what's the common ground here? Pachamama is the goddess of fertility. And so him and Francis have this love of Mother Earth, the cry of the forest and whatever stuff. There's this commonality here. All is well. And so for the faithful Catholic, or who wants to be the faithful Catholic, he's kind of torn here as to what to do. But these are the manifestations truly of the council. Francis even said the council hasn't really been implemented yet. Curious to see what that is going to look like. If this isn't it, what are we going to see soon? I don't know.
And as we've said before, I mean, really anybody listening to this, if you're having any doubts, go and just read and look into what the church was before Vatican II and look at what it is after. It's not the same. What they did at Vatican II was change the entire thing and posted the name of Catholic on it. It's not the same faith. It's not the same religion. It cannot be. Look it up yourselves. If you don't trust us, if you're getting upset with us, just go really read into it. You'll see it yourselves. It is very clear. We've had on a Vatican II expert. That is Mr. Louis Verrecchio. He's coming on again this week, I should say. And he's going to talk about these things again because he studied this. He was going around the U.S. giving seminars about Vatican II, pro Vatican II. He was in the Novus Ordo, and finally he did it enough. He's like, wait a second, I mean, this can't be Catholic.
A light bulb, yeah.
Hey, this can't be Catholic. And now obviously he's trying to warn people against it, and good for him because you know what, he's a guy who gave up his life, his livelihood, and he gave up a lot. You give up pretty much everything for the truth. And I think that's what everyone needs to also think about, that don't be afraid to give up everything for God, to really say, hey, you know what? I may lose my friends. I may lose my family, but what is true? Where is God? Where is his church? That, of course, is what matters.
So today on the vigil of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, tomorrow is her grand feast day in which Pope Pius XII infallibly declared ex cathedra. Our friends love that term in the R&R. He spoke ex cathedra. He defined that Our Lady was assumed body and soul into heaven. So be sure tomorrow you head to Mass if you can. Of course, pray the Rosary and stay devoted to her. And we celebrate tomorrow that this grand feast of her being without the stain of sin, being assumed body and soul into heaven. I did have, let me just see real quick. I don't think I have any.
Well, while you're looking for that, I wanted to comment that I think it's a really nice thing, especially for people with families, to try to do something special for Feast of Our Lady. And I read actually in my Catholic faith that there are, I think it's a sacramental. I'm not positive, but for girls, you wear a white dress with a blue sash on Feast of Our Lady. And I think there's another outfit that you can wear too. That is, I don't want to say it's a sacramental because then it may not be, but it is in my Catholic faith, and it's a special outfit that you wear for Our Lady, and I think that's really nice. And I think things like have a statue of Our Lady and get her flowers on her feast day. I mean these things that really that make, I mean, especially for children, I think it really helps them, and it helps us to remember that Our Lady's real. She exists. She was alive on earth and she is now in heaven. She is not just a fairy godmother of a story. And I think that's for me. I have to tell myself that sometimes. Remember and say, hey, okay, this isn't just a story. She's actually there. She's actually there for me. She's actually my mother, and that's an amazing thing. And we should give her flowers and dress up nicely on her feast.
We should. And what's funny too is people often mistake when they say, well, the dogma of the Assumption wasn't defined until Pius XII in 1950 or whatever it might have been. So this is new. Totally wrong. I have here, and I won't read them, but there's writings of saints and doctors of the church as far as 600 AD that speak of her Assumption into heaven. Just really one quick here. Saint Modestus of Jerusalem, he said in 630 AD, he said, as the most glorious mother of Christ, our Savior and our God, and the giver of life and immortality, she has been endowed with life by him. She has received an eternal incorruptibility of the body, together with him who has raised her up from the tomb and has taken up to himself in a way known only to him. The Assumption has been known from the time of the apostles. So people don't mistake that by saying, oh, the church made this up 2,000 years later. No, she didn't. It was dogmatically and infallibly decreed to be true. This teaching goes back to apostolic time. So another thing to remember there. But all right, Kevin, another week.
Another week. No. Well, everyone, yeah. And my last recommendation is, maybe stay off social media and at least don't listen to all the haters out there.
Right.
Matt's gonna stay on there. Matt's
haters and the losers.
Yeah, Matt's gonna go deal with all the haters and the losers. Yeah, exactly. Matt, go give him a word for me. I'm still very happy to be off Twitter. But yeah, everyone stick with us. We'll be back next week, I think. Yeah, end of August, I'm going to be gone for a couple of weeks. We'll have to figure that out with Matt. What
your buddy's still around, Nick, right?
Eric. Wow.
Eric.
You
Eric.
talked to him for 30 minutes. You don't even know his name.
There he goes.
That's pretty rough. What a jerk. Matt is a jerk. So you can go bash him on Twitter. You can go find him. Was it Matthew_Theo? I think that's
_Theo.
I believe.
Theo. Still don't know.
Go give him a hard time and just say all sorts of nice things about me. Matt, until next week. God bless you.
Thank you for listening. Tune in every Monday at 9 Eastern for a brand new episode.